Hi, I'm Mary Lee Weber, and this is Around the Town. And I just want to let you know that Frank is on a different assignment. So we're here today at the Stony Creek Museum event called Oysters and More, and we're about ready to interview Jonathan Waters, who is the Oysterman of the Year. And we'll give a quick conversation about exactly what's going on here tonight and a little bit about oystering down here at the Thimbles. Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, Mary. How you doing?
Good, good. How's it going tonight? What do we have here? What's going on?
Great. This is a big celebration of oysters in Stony Creek and the museum. Good pairing.
Right. And what kind of oysters are we showing off here tonight?
Well, these are Crassiatia virginicus, but they're both they're all farm-raised oysters. Some are wild and kind of run out in cages. Others are hatchery raised in cages. Mm-hmm. So you're represented by three different types of oysters.
Right. So people have a chance to sort of sample the oysters and
and then we also have a lot of the gear here that shows how they're raised. And there's also the piles of shell, the shell culch piles that we plant on the bottom to catch baby oysters on. They're also part of the shell restoration program, which is a pretty big thing that's starting to happen in the state and is very key to the oyster population and production and the environment. Protecting the local environment.
Right. Let's go back a little bit into the history of oystering here in Stony Creek and tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved.
Well, years ago, when I grew up in the creek. The oyster company, Ball Oyster Company, was still in existence, and I just kind of fell in love with the boats and the activity. My father was from Maryland, so oysters were something that we knew about, and we ate quite a lot of them. I went on to various different careers, and ended up coming back here because I noticed that there was really nothing going on in the oyster business in Stony Creek. It was in the 70s, and I think there had been hurricanes and such, and it wasn't a lot of activity. But I knew that at a time it had been a big deal. So I started a little business, and with a small boat, and actually a lot of the fellows that are working here now had worked for me, and we expanded into 3 boats. We used to plant 10,000 bushel of shell in this lot. We'd get it delivered from Rhode Island. They'd drop it here. We'd load it onto barges, take it out, and wash it off onto the beds. Catch the oysters back, and so it was pretty successful. It did well, and mainly I just got involved because I loved oysters. I loved the oyster boats. I liked the people I was working with, and I was working outside, and it was just a win-win.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the boating here and the oyster boats. Tell us a little bit about that.
This one is the Tiger, and she's a sailing oyster boat from the Bridgeport natural beds area. Right. Yep. And she would have been towing hand dredges like this, and no power, just sails. And they would drag in sort of a figure-8 pattern, and that was sort of the source of a lot of the oysters for the other oystermen. They would catch them in this boat, and then they would sell them to other oystermen who would grow them out. And what we have here next is these are the are the present boats that are raising oysters in cages, and they're which is actually a very smart idea because, for one thing, they're protected from predators, and also they're you know how many you have.
Right. So what's an oyster predator?
Man,
Okay.
he's probably the five-finger one is probably the used to be in the old days. That was probably the worst. But no, we have actually numerous predators. Starfish are infamous. They're also the oyster drills, mudworms. There are a variety of predators, and every blackfish when they're small, they love them. They just chew them.
So just in terms of the amount of oysters that are here, what are we talking about here? And what is there such a thing as a season for oysters?
Well, we go. Yeah, traditionally the winter months were the R months, where this was the season, and that had a lot to do with water temperature and refrigeration, and keeping the oysters cold. Also, it has a little bit to do with the spawning, because the oysters spawn in right around July, for early part of July. The water temperature gets up to 72 degrees, and that's the trigger. And they spawn both male and female. Oysters are hermaphroditic. They, I guess they change sex depending on, if they need more males, and there's more males around. So, yeah, pretty interesting. Yeah, or more females. So, but they fertilize in the water column. So you have these little free-swimming microscopic organisms, little oysters that fertilize, and then they grow into another organism that turns into, at a certain point, wants to set on a hard substrate, like oyster shell, rocks, your boat bottom, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's just fascinating.
It's quite involved. There's a lot of science involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. It's so wonderful that you're working with the Stony Creek Museum and putting this on tonight. And I think it's good PR for the oystering business.
Well, it's wonderful. And actually, this is a perfect fit to have the museum, which was, and oystering, which was a historical activity in the town, in the village of Stony Creek, for us to be able to work with you guys to do this. It really, it's ideal. It's hand in hand.
Right. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Oh, well, you're very welcome.
Hi, we're back, and we just interviewed Jonathan Waters, and now we're moving on to Spencer Bartels and at Stony Creek Oysters and Thomas, right?
Franco.
Thomas Franco. Okay, so Spencer, talk a little bit about what's going on here at Oysters and More, and a little bit of overview of oysters in general here in the creek.
Okay, great. Oysters and More is a fundraiser for the Stony Creek Museum, and we have all the local farms from the surrounding waters here in Stony Creek and the Thimble Islands. They have come out to shuck their oysters. We've got wild-raised oysters and farm-raised oysters. Wild-raised oysters are part of a aquaculture restoration of oyster reefs. We're trying to rebuild the local population of oysters that we currently have. And then we're also producing oysters in cages. It's a bottom cage culture. Thomas and I have been working from seed that we get from about 4 millimeter to 6 millimeter, and we grow it out to about 3 inches and then take it to market. So that's kind of what we're showcasing here tonight is the wild raised and the farm raised.
That's fantastic. So Thomas, how did you get involved?
Well, actually, he's my uncle, so no, I just kind of have a passion for the water in general. Like I grew up around boats. I grew up around him who has boats. I loved going to like the wooden boat show in Mystic, and I kind of just fell in love with boats in general. And then he opened this up to me a couple years ago, and I took it. I said, yeah, let's do it.
So what have you taken from it in the last couple of years? What's your perspective?
I think I've gotten a little bit more of a sense of responsibility. I've gotten a lot more responsible with handling my own boats and figuring stuff out. Yeah, I think I just learned like new attributes, like stuff I didn't know about myself through it, like responsibility and character. Yeah.
It's amazing because, one of the things is the Long Island Sound's a pretty big part of Connecticut.
It sure is, yeah, and it's great to have, like, Thomas came aboard a couple of years ago. He was actually one of the founding guys that helped start our company, and to have young kids out here is great. They learn all about boat handling, marine environment, tides, currents, navigation. So there's so much that comes with oystering, and Thomas can tell you that I think he was out there once afloat and he had to fix the engine in order to keep it going so we could harvest and make market. So
it's a lot of skill sets you're using.
Yeah, a lot of skill sets. And
so talk a little bit more about the history of oysters. Jonathan mentioned a little bit about that, but I think there's more to know about oysters in general and why it's important to enhance this here in Connecticut and in the Thimbles.
Right, sure. So the oyster itself is a remarkable animal. We've been farming oysters in Stony Creek and the Thimbles since I think the 1700s, maybe even earlier. And the oyster itself, it's an interesting animal. As it spawns, and it spawns into the top of the water column, and it travels with the water column for about 2 weeks, and it creates a small flipper fin, and you still can't see it unless you're under a microscope, and they swim down to the bottom and they try to attach themselves to something rough like an oyster shell. And once an oyster attaches itself to an oyster shell, it doesn't move. It's not like a clam or a scallop that can continue to move and swim around. An oyster will attach itself and stay there and then grow to 3, 4, 5 inches, and it'll continue breeding, and other oysters will come and attach themselves to that oyster, and they create these reefs. And these reefs are wonderful because they're a lot like coral reefs, where they harbor a lot of marine environment. So there's a lot of crabs and crustaceans and snails and finfish and a lot of animals that are smaller. They can lay eggs and hide from protect themselves from being eaten. And oyster reefs are good for coastal erosion. It's anti-coastal erosion. So big storms come in, and these reefs help maintain the coastline and keep erosion at bay. One oyster will filter 50 gallons of water a day, taking out the nitrates. And the oyster itself is, I think Jonathan mentioned, it's the best fast food that nature has ever given us, because it comes in its own little package. You open it, you slurp it down, and you throw the shell back into the water. There's no waste. It's all recycling, and it's really, really good protein. It's one of the most carbon-based proteins that we have on the planet.
Oh, fantastic. So one of the things I know you're doing here is the recycling program. You're going to talk to people a little bit about that. Yes. I'm sure we're going to get a chance to talk to someone who knows about that.
Yes.
But
Tim Macklin, and they're down here. Core is a huge part of what we do for restoration. Right now, currently, shell is at a premium, and it's very hard to find oyster shell, because as we lose our oysters in the water, we're losing the oyster shell that goes along with that. Mm-hmm. And back when it was an abundant product, a lot of the oyster shell went into landfills or went into people's driveways, landscaping projects, and it really needs to go right back into the water so baby oysters can continue to grow and thrive. Right. And Core is that, I'll let those guys speak for what they're doing, but we partner with Core, and a lot of our restoration work, we take their shell and we put it back in the water, and we put baby spat oysters on that and grow more oysters and build more reefs.
So. Right. Well, it sounds like you just really need to educate people to know what to do with their oyster shells, right?
Right. Exactly. Everybody needs a recycle bin on their back porch. If you're eating an oyster, put it back in the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Right. Off the driveways and into the water.
Right, exactly.
Out before you put them into the driveway, I guess. Right. All right, well, thanks, Spencer. Thank you so much, Hans.
Super, thank you.
We'll get another group to talk.
Sounds great.
So we just talked to Spencer Bartels and Thomas Franco of Stony Creek Oysters, and now we're going to move and talk to Emily Waters, who is just an incredible person in terms of her knowledge base about oysters. So let's talk to her about what's going on with oysters here in the creek. Emily, hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Good. So talk a little bit about the oysters here in the creek and how you have influenced that business here.
So oystering has been in my life, my entire life. My father's an oyster farmer and had worked on the water and a waterman, and so it's always been something that's been part of it. And oysters have been here for a really long time, right before any of us were here. And so one of the things that's been important for me has been keeping that going, working the natural beds here whenever possible, so that we're able to maintain those and maintain a population level there, so that they don't overpopulate, right, and die out due to disease or anything along those lines. And then making it available to our local population and trying to do sort of, the storefront down at the shop so that people can come in the community and get some oysters.
Yeah. And your actual career has really been integrated into this. You're at Mystic now, right?
Yeah, I work at Mystic Seaport. I'm specifically in the shipyard as part of the management of the shipyard up there. So working with wooden boats, doing restoration of wooden boats, and supporting the trades in that, which dovetails really nicely into the work that we do here.
Yeah. So Leeds Island Oysters, how long has that been around?
Yeah, so Leeds Island Oysters has been around since about 2017. It got started just as, small, like just sort of for family and friends at the beginning, and then took off from there once it was clear that there was a source of oysters that were still there, still happy and proliferating, and then we were able to take it from there and expand and really focus on the restoration work, which is really what our major focus is, restoring those natural beds.
Right. And there's all sorts of types of oysters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so are you referring to the two different types that are around here? So this idea of a farm raised? Perfect. Okay, so there's farm raised and there's wild. So the wild oysters naturally set here in Long Island Sound, specifically in the estuaries and sort of in the marshes, the flats. And those need to be harvested and then taken out into deeper water to depurate before they can be consumed. And then another option is the more traditionally farm raised, and those are raised from spat, from baby oysters that are purchased and brought into this area and then raised in cages, through their entire life cycle. So it's just two different ways of approaching the same thing.
Right. And you've been doing that since 2017.
Yep. Yeah, and so we've been doing the wild component. So we take those oysters from Hoadley Creek and Jarvis Creek, take those out into the deeper water in cages, have them depurate, and then harvest them for consumption. The other thing that we've been doing is taking the large oysters, which are not ones that people would typically want to see on a plate, so larger than those 3 inches, and those are usually considered spawning oysters. They have lots of babies. So we've been supplying the state aquaculture programs through Sea Grant, which is a Yukon extension program. So through them, we've been working on populating natural beds down in Bridgeport and through in here with the Branford Aquaculture Initiative as well.
So where do you see the future of oystering?
Yeah, so I think, frankly, the future is with these small businesses working alongside the larger businesses like Cops Island and things like that. This allows us to do boutique, stay small, work within our community, and be supported by our community, which is what we're all about. So I think there's a really nice home for that, and we can see even in the last 3 years, the number of little oyster businesses here has grown, and that's a really important piece for both Leeds Island Oysters and Jonathan Waters with Thimble Island Shellfish, of mentoring those people and sort of the knowledge that comes of, in their case, and Kim and Jonathan's, 70 odd years on the water versus 40 years on the water for me. Like it's there's a lot that I don't know yet, and there's a lot that the incomers don't know yet, but luckily we're all doing it together.
Right. Spencer talked a little bit about the recycling program here. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but what's your take on that, on recycling?
I think it's wonderful that it's officially happening. So this recycling piece, the idea of putting down shell on beds, is something that has been going on for a very long time, frankly. And it was something that my dad, where we are right now, used to be full of shell piles when my dad was at the height of Thimble Island Shellfish. In that case, though, is mostly coming from shucking houses specifically. What's so cool about the restoration work now is we've got this awesome cycle where it's happening in local restaurants. Core is going and collecting oyster shell from local restaurants, and then it's coming back to local oyster companies. So you can see that impact, and you can know, like if I go down to Fairhaven Oyster Bar or something along those lines and have some oysters, those oyster shells are going to end up back in Long Island Sound rather than this disconnect if they could go really far away or frankly end up in a driveway or something along those lines, which is beautiful, don't get me wrong.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything more you want to add that I maybe didn't touch upon?
No, I think you hit it. I'd say, eat an oyster, enjoy it. They're delicious.
Thank you so much, Emily.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're continuing the program here with Kim Granberry, and we're going to discuss a little bit about oyster bed restoration. So, Kim, tell us a little bit about oyster bed restoration.
Well, oyster bed restoration is similar in a way to agriculture, and we're actually working with the Department of Agriculture on a grant to do restoration. And in our case, it starts in by stirring the bottom. It's like harrowing the surface of the field. It pulls the shell up onto the top, and it aids in oyster habitat. So that's the first step we do. Then we go back in and we put oyster shell on top of the bottom to create a hard, rough area for the oysters to set onto. And that's similar to, what did I have here? It's similar to fertilizer. It makes the ground more receptive to spreading the shell. Then we take the larger oysters that are too big to market for half shell. We hold those aside, and after we've put the shell down, we take them and we broadcast the large oysters on top of the shell bed because they will spawn. So those are spawners, and they spawn, and then that catches onto the shell that's down there, and it creates the next generation of oysters. And then our harvesting operation is a sustainably harvested wild-caught oyster, and we do it by hand. We're not going for volume, but we work the beds, and it's a smaller part of our operation, and we do retail and parties and weddings and all sorts of things like that. So,
And that's Hoadley Creek?
that's Hoadley Creek is our bed.
And where is that?
It's the borderline between Guilford and Branford. And then we also have a bed on Jarvis Creek, and that is the next creek over towards Stony Creek.
And how long has that been going on?
This was put together as the Branford Aquaculture Initiative in 2017. Dave Carey had the vision, and it was his creative idea. And the state purchased 700 acres in the Thimble Islands, and now there are three of us working here as a collaborative, and we're hoping to expand it into more companies, a lot of small collaborative companies working in the Thimbles.
And then how do we engage, the educational component of it is really important, so how do you engage like students and other people in the project?
We'll probably be working with the Sound School. I was in there last week and discussing it with them. We're also talking to them about possibly producing seed from our own oysters that then the two agriculture companies here can use to grow out in their operations. And we've got a couple of high school students who worked with us this summer, and hoping some Southern Connecticut students are interested. So it's we're basically hoping to get high school and college students in to help out and learn, and then we'll work with the Sound School on whatever they'd like to work on.
Right, and it's just developing an industry here in Connecticut and the Thimbles.
That was the original idea, was to bring back the Thimbles as an industry to employ locals, hopefully get some younger people in. I'm going to age out pretty soon. I got 2 junior partners, and so I hope they'll take over, and then I hope they'll bring in some other young people, and maybe this will all come to fruition long after I've gone aloft.
Thank you so much, Kim. Appreciate it.
You bet. We usually do this with a tractor, but it's a matter of, sorry I turn away from you. We load the boat up with shell, and then we take it out onto the beds that we're going to broadcast the shell on, and we blow it off with a fire hose and with shovels. But
Blow it off right into the water.
right into the water. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get some shots of that.
As you can see, that's a young man's job. That's what we have Thomas for. And we do, when we're on the boat, we use shovels more, but here we'll use a tractor to actually load from the piles that you see around here. Tractor will bring it over and just dump onto the conveyor, and once we've got about 8,000 pounds on the boat, we'll stop the conveyor and go out, drop it, and come back for more. Yeah, it's a pretty cool operation.
And we're back, and we're going to be talking to Bob Babcock, who is the president of the Stony Creek Museum Board, and excited tonight about having a wonderful event called Oysters and More. Bob, tell us a little bit about it.
Oysters and More is a great show we're putting on. We originally were going to have just oysters, but then we realized we should broaden the horizon of our thinking, so we have a catered event as well as oysters. And the oyster line is rather large right now, so maybe that's a good thing. I think it's a great thing. But as I said, the line is large, and there's a number of different types of oysters, all from here in the Stony Creek area. And it's just been a great event so far. I think we can say we've darn near oversold the event, so that's a good thing. It's a fundraiser for the Stony Creek Museum, and this is our second major one. Our first one was 3 years ago. But this one is seeming to draw a larger crowd, and everybody seems to be happy. They're dressed for the occasion, and everybody seems to be smiling and happy for this.
On a beautiful day.
And a beautiful day. The sun is shining. There's no sign of rain, right. And it's supposed to be this way right through the evening. And we're going to go. We start at 4, and we will be finishing up around 8 o'clock. So the day will be a full day. I think we'll start serving the food other than the oysters in about 45 minutes to an hour. And that's going to add a lot of activity to everyone's thinking here with more food.
So talk a little bit, Bob, about the Stony Creek Museum and its mission and kind of how it's progressed in the last few years.
The Stony Creek Museum is about 15 years old. We started with one of those events that starts in somebody's living room, and then thinking goes on and on and on about how we can grow this. And we're able to get the former St. Therese Church here in Stony Creek. That was an older building, actually was condemned. And we were able to get that building for very, very little dollars. And then we went on a fundraising hunt to restore the building. And frankly, through the generosity of a lot of people in our area, we were able to get a lot of people did an awful lot of volunteer work. The floors in the building were terrible. We had somebody that came in and did all the floors over for us, and they came out beautifully. And then we wanted drapes for the windows. We wanted that taken care of, and we got some donations for that as well. But the community has been incredibly generous to the museum. The museum primarily deals with saving of artifacts. We have a person that does that, person that's been working at Peabody Museum for many years, very talented person. Our archivist is the proper title for that. But the main thing is education, and even today at this event, being that oystering is starting to be active here in the creek, we have some people giving everybody some education on what are oysters all about. We are a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible to the individual or company that wants to help us out. But and our donations have been fine. We've gotten a lot of support from the community, and also I would say outside the community. And the town has been incredibly helpful to many projects that we want to get involved with. So overall, I think we have a great relationship with our donor base, as well as the community and the greater community of the shoreline.
Right, it enables you to keep it free admission.
Yeah, free admission. We have an executive director that puts together programs. Marilee Weber, all of you probably know, does a phenomenal job for us for children's programs, and she has just done a wonderful job. She's been with us now for a number of years, and frankly, ever since Marilee came on board, there's an added new life to the Stony Creek Museum.
Thanks, Bob.
But it is the truth.
I remember. No, so the museum did start, too, with the Flesh and Stone book. Can you talk a little bit about Flesh and Stone?
Yeah, Flesh and Stone is a book that was written a number of years ago, and it was about actually the history of the Stony Creek Quarry and about the immigrants that that arrived here in Stony Creek, the rooming houses where they lived, the churches that they attended, and it was really about the history of Stony Creek. It is an absolutely beautiful book. It's a great coffee table book. We do sell them. Actually, we have to go to a reprinting because we're sold out. And frankly, we're going to put on a campaign to raise some money because right now to get books reprinted is very expensive, and we want to do it right because it's a beautiful book, and we don't want to cheapen it by printing it any other way than the beautiful copy that we have to give out presently.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the volunteers for this evening's event, Oysters and More. Was the board really participating in that?
The board, we didn't know what we were going to do this year. We wanted to do a fundraiser this year, and one of our board members, Spence Bartels, he is an oysterman, and he brought up this idea about how the oystering community in Stony Creek is really growing. So here again, when you get to education, there's a table here that is being brought forward to whomever wants to learn more about oystering. The board became enlightened when Spence brought up the idea of having this event, and it centers around education and actually tasting oysters. So those that have come here today for dinner and the fundraiser, we are giving out a number of different styles of oysters, some reef grown, some cage grown. But again, that's all part of the history of the oystering. But the board has been very, very active in the support of this program. And the oystermen themselves are here volunteering their time and volunteering to come up with their oysters to be able to shuck the oysters. Actually, if you want to learn how to shuck an oyster, you can learn that here at this event. So there's still time. It's only 5:15. So if you want to do some oyster shucking, you can still have time to arrive.
Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Hi, so we just talked to Bob Babcock, who is the president of the Stony Creek Museum Board. And then now we're going to head over and really talk about some interesting component of oystering, and that is the recycling of them. So it's part of CORE, and Tim Macklin will be discussing that. So Tim, tell us a little bit about recycling.
So we're CORE, Collective Oyster Recycling and Restoration, and we have a statewide shell recycling program in Connecticut. We're partnered up with about 50 restaurants from Greenwich to Mystic. We provide them, it's a free program. We provide them with those 5-gallon buckets. They fill them up, so basically instead of them throwing the shells in the trash, they put them in the bucket. We pick them up once a week. We take them to our curing site in East Haven, Connecticut, where they cure, which basically means they just sit out in the elements for 6 months, get dried out and cleaned up. And then every spring, we transport all of the shell that we recycled over that year to places like Branford and to the Bureau of Aquaculture in Milford. It gets loaded onto boats like this, and then they take it out and they plant it in Long Island Sound, and it provides a substrate for baby oysters to land on.
Oh, how long have you been doing this program?
We're 2 years in, so we started in July 2023, and we've recycled over 800,000 pounds of shell in just 2 years.
Is that a year-round program?
Yes, we're year-round. It fluctuates, obviously much busier in the summer, but we operate it year-round. So, yeah.
And the restaurants, do you have to call them up and ask them, or how do you get that?
Yeah, we have a little folder that we bring in with some information about the program. We walk in there. Usually is the best way to do it. Sometimes they always think we're selling them something, so it's like sometimes they scatter. But we sit down and we try to talk to them. If we know people in town that can make an introduction for us, we'll do that. But yeah, sometimes it takes a little convincing, but really it's a free program. It saves them money because they're not having to throw away heavy shell in the trash. They have to pay to get hauled off. So it's really a win-win, and then they get to promote that their restaurant is involved in a sustainable practice.
Right. So how is it a free program?
So we received a grant from the Connecticut Department of Agriculture in 2023, and that provided us with all the funds that we needed to create the infrastructure to set up the program. But that grant runs out in this October. So we've secured a couple other grants. We have everything that we need, all the equipment, the infrastructure. Now it's just getting funding to keep the operational costs going. So fuel, insurance, salary, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but it's a very important, mission that we have here. It's crucial to really keeping Long Island Sound a healthy place. Oysters provide a ton of benefits for Long Island Sound. So,
So the restaurants have been cooperative.
Yeah, they love it. We haven't had any complaints. I think everyone's concerned at first. They're like, oh, oyster shells are going to sit in a bucket and get stinky. As long as they cut the tops on and everything like that, it's really no problem. We're there every week. We leave clean buckets behind, and so they all instead of putting it in a trash can, they put it in that bucket. That's really all they have to do. So, yep.
How do you get interested in this program?
I grew up in Connecticut on Long Island Sound. As a kid, I spent my summers on Long Island Sound in the water in the tide pool. So I just have a pure love and affinity for Long Island Sound, and just have always been connected to it. Had multiple careers, but always had been involved in shellfishing in some way. I was on the Fairfield Shellfish Commission. We started a small pilot shell recycling program there, and when the hope was to expand it statewide. And 2 years ago we did that. And so now we're, like I said, 50 restaurants. We're slowly expanding and hope to be in every coastal restaurant in Connecticut.
Great. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you think is really important?
No, I just think that we're a piece of the puzzle to making Long Island Sound a healthy and vibrant environment. We love our partnership with Leeds Island and Stony Creek Oysters. It's just, I think, a great example of industry and nonprofits working together. We need their expertise and their experience. They know oysters better than we do, but they need shell. And so it's important to get that shell back to them so they can, use it in the proper way. So just love the partnership, and we love Branford, and just happy to be here.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll wrap up tonight with a wonderful event here down in the Stony Creek area on Oysters and More, sponsored by the Stony Creek Museum. Hope you've learned a little bit today. Frank is on assignment, so just wrapping it up, and thank you so much for watching.